Excellencies, distinguished participants and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the seminar on the promotion of universal ideals of religious moderation and tolerance. This seminar is organized by the mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN, pursuant to the ASEAN +3 Cooperation Work Plan 2018-2022 to promote moderation as a common value. Moderation as a universal ideal of all religions in ASEAN +3 region is one of the vital elements to realize East Asia community of peace and prosperity. This morning's webinar aims to serve as platform to enable participants to understand the definition of moderation, discuss current situations of violent extremism, and suggest policy recommendations, emphasizing a common understanding of different religions present and practices throughout the region. My name is Rifat Fakhir, Communications Officer of the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, or ASEAN IPR, and it is my honor to be your webinar moderator this morning. The ASEAN IPR is proud to be able to support this morning's event and continue our cooperation with the Republic of Korea. Before we start, just some housekeeping announcement. To ensure everybody's comfort in following the discussion, please only use the chat box if you have technical questions regarding the conduct of the webinar. Please be mindful, polite, and considerate in your messages. As this is a Zoom meeting setting, please ensure that your microphone is on mute if you are not a speaker or presenter to minimize noise disruption. If you would like to ask question to one of the speakers during the webinar, please write down your question in the chat box with the following format: your name, organization, and your question. We thank you for your cooperation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart this morning's webinar, I would like to invite His Excellency Kwon Hee-sok, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency, the screen is yours.
Your Excellency Igusti Puja, Executive Director of ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. Distinguished speakers, Dr. Park Jung-hoon, Dr. Mohammad Hassan Ansori, Professor Phillips Beaumont, and Professor Woo Bingbing. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to extend my warm welcome to you all. It is my great pleasure to host today's ASEAN +3 seminar on the promotion of universal ideals of religious moderation and tolerance in collaboration with the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. I am very much honored and pleased to meet with the renowned experts, albeit virtually. I think the definition of a seminar's keyword, moderation, is worth mentioning. Moderation is generally defined as the avoidance of excess or extremes, especially in one's behavior or political opinions. Moderation is therefore understood as a synonym for tolerance. In recent years, the issue of radicalization and violent extremism has gained heightened attention in ASEAN. The ASEAN political and security blueprint agreed to realize a community that embraces tolerance and moderation, fully respects the different religions, cultures, and languages of our people, upholds common values in the spirit of unity in diversity, as well as addresses the threat of violent extremism in all its forms and manifestations. Religious moderation in the context of ASEAN +3 mechanism, as well as the most appropriate attitude we must preemptively pursue in order to prevent radicalism, respect diversity, and preserve harmony and balance in our society. Moderation as a universal ideal of all religions in our region is one of the vital elements to realize the East Asia Community for Peace and Prosperity, as envisioned in the existing APT Work Plan 2018 to 2022. Diversity and tolerance are indispensable values in our region, where 2.3 billion people can coexist peacefully and harmoniously. Such an environment is indeed what ASEAN Plus 3 has tenaciously sought throughout the 25-year-long activities. Against this backdrop, it could not be more timely and relevant for us to discuss this issue today. I hope today's seminar will enable all of us to understand the current situation of violent extremism, especially to examine the substance of radicalization spread across social media and explore ways to promote religious moderation and tolerance in the region and beyond. I wish you all a productive and fruitful discussion onwards. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my pleasure to invite someone I am very familiar with, His Excellency I Gusti Agung Wesaka Puja, Executive Director of ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, to deliver his congratulatory remarks. Executive Director, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Pa-Iva. Excellency, Ambassador Kwon, Excellencies, distinguished speakers, dear friends, colleagues, this is a reality check. When we saw news on televisions, on internet, or on social media, we witness every day shocking and terrifying images. We saw the images of violence. It is terrifying because we can identify the victims of those violence because of their background, belief, ideology, or even because of their gender. Because those violence seems to be causing even greater divisions around the world amongst countries and amongst our society. It is considered that moderation and tolerance are the way to curb extremism by choosing mutual respect and inclusivity, as well as strengthening the bonds between different communities and faiths. I couldn't agree more what Ambassador Kwon just mentions just now. It is for these reasons, Excellencies, I have the pleasure to congratulate ASEAN Plus 3 and the missions of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN for organizing today's very important seminar on promotion of universal ideals of religious moderation and tolerance. The ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation is proud to support this seminar and to continue our long-standing cooperations with the Republic of Korea on this issue. Excellencies, dear colleagues, living in a pluralistic society sometimes is very challenging. How we can strike balance between democracy and freedom on the one hand and the rule of law on the other. History has proven that pluralism and democracy can go hand in hand. It is our common interest to ensure that religion, democracy, and pluralism can thrive as uniting factors. Under its capacity-building functions, the ASEAN APR is tasked to organize seminars, workshops, training, and promotion, the voices of moderations, and advanced work in the area of interfaith dialogue. In addition, the ASEAN APR is also to be an implementing entity of 10 action lines of the ASEAN Political Security Community Blueprint 2025. Among such action lines is the call to intensify involvement of all members of the community in activities relevant to the promotion of culture of peace and moderation. Such undertakings are very much in line with the APT Cooperation Work Plan 2018-2022, in particular under paragraph 1.5, promote moderation as common value through A, empowerment of moderates in value in various religions, B, promotion of interfaith and intercultural dialogue to enhance mutual understanding among different cultures and religions, and finally, promotions of universal ideas of religious moderations and tolerance. It is most serendipitous that ASEAN IPR's collaboration with the ROK have been along the lines of capacity building and the promotions of tolerance and moderations. Being regions with population of diverse background, nationality, race, religion, ethnicity, political views and stance, etc., ASEAN has always focused on the commonality of its member states and its peoples. Understanding tolerance and respect amongst the peoples of ASEAN and ASEAN member states has become the mantra in bringing us together in a harmonious society and community. Nevertheless, even ASEAN is not prone to what we view as non-traditional security threats, such as radicalism and extremism, which gave way to even higher threat, such as terrorism. This is why, Excellencies, it's most imperative to cultivate values such as understandings, tolerance, and respect in diversity. Continuous intercommunal interaction must also be promoted to enhance mutual understanding, tolerance, and social cohesion. And what better group of individuals to start fostering such values than the youth? We can act as a bridge and play a role in helping improve understanding and strengthen the values of inclusivity. We can support the community in creating a better social and political climate which encourage mutual respect and tolerance. Let things and acts out of the box. How we can help people to avoid locking themselves in a straitjacket of a single and static identity. In 2018, one of our first collaborations with the Republic of Korea kick-started with the convening of the ASEAN, which are the heart of democracy. And let us sustain democracy by promoting tolerance, mutual respect, and fostering goodwill. Wish you a very productive seminar. Kamsahamnida. Thank you very much.
Last one, just for luck. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. Now we get to the main event. There will be 2 sessions in this webinar with 2 speakers in each session. Following presentation of all 4 speakers, there will be a discussion or question and answer session allocated towards the tail end of the webinar. So the first session will cover the current situation of violent extremism in the 21st century. Our first speaker this morning is Dr. Jong-hoon Park. Dr. Park is a senior researcher at the Institute of East Asian Studies at Sogang University, Seoul. He holds a PhD in political science from the National University of Singapore. Much of his research has focused on political Islam and voting behavior in Indonesia. He has published on these subjects in Asian Studies Review, as well as Journal of East Asian Studies. He has also attempted to broaden his analytical scope by conducting research on various subjects regarding Southeast Asian and Korean politics. The topic of his presentation this morning is Party Politics Matters, Inclusiveness and Tolerance of Political Islam in Indonesia. Dr. Park, the screen is yours.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, very loud and clear.
So, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN for allowing me to speak the following messages in this seminar. My name is Jung Park, and I recently won the PhD degree from the National University of Singapore by doing research about the political Islam in Indonesia. So, selamat pagi, anda sekalian. In this talk, I would like to tell you about why politics led by political parties is important in terms of promoting moderation and tolerance of Islam in Southeast Asia. And I also would like to make some remarks about why promoting moderation is important in terms of improving the relationship between South Korea and Southeast Asia by reducing misunderstanding toward Islam among South Koreans. Islam and Southeast Asia has been related closely to each other for a long time, obviously. Historical evidence show that the introduction of Islam to Southeast Asia can be traced to more or less 7th century, when Muslim traders from the Arab and India began settling in the region's harbors. As local rulers gradually accepted Islam as their state religion, by the 16th century, Islam has spread across throughout maritime Southeast Asia, including Sumatra, Java, and Moluccas, Kalimantan, and Mindanao, and the peninsular Malaysia. Some ethnic groups in mainland Southeast Asia, such as the Charms in Cambodia and the Arakaneses in Myanmar, also converted to Islam. The Islam's clout remained largely intact during the period of colonialism and nationalism. Indeed, Islam has been a state religion of Malaysia and Brunei Darussalam, and enjoyed a predominant position in Indonesia nowadays. It should be noted that pluralism has played a key role in defining such progress of Islamic proselytization in Southeast Asia. And as John Furnival mentioned almost 80 years ago, Southeast Asia is one of the most pluralist societies in terms of ethnic, linguistic, cultural, and religious differences in the world. Alongside with the geographic remoteness from the Arabian Peninsula, the region's own pluralistic nature has been crucial in boosting the high degree of tolerance and inclusiveness within the Muslim community regarding not only setting a relationship with other religions, but also promoting multiple interpretation of Islamic doctrines. For example, in Indonesia, there has been a coexistence of multiple variants of Islam, from deeply localized version to a conservative Islamism. Such phenomenon occurs since the 19th.
Thank you, Pak Rifat. Excellencies, Ambassador Kwon of the ROK mission to ASEAN, Excellencies, our longtime friend at CSIS, Ambassador Puja, Executive Director of IPR, and co-panelists. I'm honored to be invited, and thank you for having me in this morning session on topics that I think are very important. A little bit of introduction, although Pak Rifat, as a chair of this session, already mentioned about my current affiliation, but I think it is for me, if I may do some little advertisements of this university, the Indonesian International Islamic University. It is a new university established by President Joko Widodo, part of the National Strategic Project, or PSN, that mandate us at the university. Now, I am tasked to discuss about moderation practices in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, and in East Asia. One caveat that I have to mention from the very beginning is that I'm not an expert on East Asia, but probably we can discuss some aspects of this that I understand. I have slides. I hope our friends at the mission can pull it up for us so that we can see as my talking points. Next slide, please. Now, I think we should start with the modalities. Why we have to recognize moderation and why this is important for us. There are international obligations for countries, and the basic one is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then I quote here in the preamble that we need to regard the basic rights, the basic human rights, that we all should enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want. I highlighted and bold these sentences that I would come back later. And also in the second modalities and part of our international obligation as member of international community, there is an international covenant on civil and political rights. And same thing, this covenant actually really highlight our obligation, but it is mentioned that in order for us to fulfill this obligation, to fulfill and to achieve freedom of speech and belief, freedom from fear and want, it can be only achieved if conditions are created whereby anyone may enjoy his civil and political rights as well as his economic, social, and cultural rights. So it is not a standalone concept. Moderation, freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom of speech. It has to be, it is working not in the empty shell, but this is part of the environment that we need to create, environment conducive for economic, social, and cultural right. Next slide, please. The third modalities, an international obligation, is UN Declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and discrimination based on religion and belief. So in the first article of this declaration, again, it reiterates that everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. What is the practice in our part of the world, in the region? So the first three are documents at the international level, global level. And ASEAN, I think we have been progressing, right, Pak Puja, on this part, especially on the acknowledgement of the need for moderation and belief and democracy. And now it is contained in ASEAN documents. And one of the pillars of ASEAN, that is ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, ASCC, has the blueprint 2025 that was adopted during the 27th ASEAN Summit in 2015 in Kuala Lumpur. And the pillar, ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, it is mentioned in the ASEAN document and the ASEAN Secretariat website that we are aiming in the region to form an inclusive community that promotes and protects human rights. So these ideas have already been the ASEAN documents. That means the obligations of the member states of ASEAN in Southeast Asia. This leads to the new concept of creating culture of prevention. And I think this is the idea that we all need to discuss more. And then there are a lot of initiatives that have been taken by ASEAN with the help of ASEAN Plus3 and ASEAN Dialogue Partners. Next slide, please. One of the most diversity in terms of type of government. We have governments that are democracy, non-democracies, or in between in the region. Also, this is a region filled with country with the different level of development. And this is multicultural. The region has multicultural societies, religion, and also ethnicities, right? So again, then moderation is a means to manage all these diversities in the region. So we all need to use this, but at the same time, it is a goal that we need to achieve. Number two, when we refer back to the basic documents at the UN level or at the international level, it is stated earlier that it is also a problem of governance, and ASEAN documents also highlighted that. And Pak Puja also mentioned in his intervention that the problem of governance, the right for development, at the same time we need to balance with democracy. That would be quote unquote messier, because democracy requires participation, and that decision making will be much more difficult to make. So I think in order for us to avoid extreme behavior, because studies, many academic studies have recorded, identified problems of extreme behavior or extremism or radical behaviors, not only confined to one religion, but all religions face the same problem. Now, in the context of Southeast Asia, where most of the countries in Southeast Asia are developing countries, so sometimes these societal conflicts, conflicts between groups within the society, are actually part of development problem. We are all, most of us are developing countries. So in order for us to ensure freedom, democracy, and so on and so forth, it has to be linked with how we manage our human development and how we manage our economic development. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that basic needs have to be met in order for us to maintain moderate behavior within the society. Because without basic needs, conflicts will be more likely to occur in countries that are poor and so on, that the citizens have grievances over their fellow citizens or grievances against the government. So basic needs have to be met. And most developing countries, if we look at the data, exhibit low performance in the basic three indicators of freedom, of human development index, and also economic growth. Next slide, please. Now, this is the data. I hope you could see all this data that I plot. So I basically plot this data from Freedom House survey, data available every year. So most of the countries, Freedom House survey cover most of the countries, right? And also we have Human Development Index produced every year by UNDP, and also GDP record of countries. So if I plot these three data, the vertical axis indicate level of freedom. The higher the country on the vertical axis, the higher the freedom. And on the horizontal axis, we can look at the Human Development Index of all these countries. The more to the right, the higher the Human Development Index. Right? And the circle size indicates GDP. So that's the challenges that we have. Now, if I may, to conclude, what are the opportunities for us in Southeast Asia? Number one, I think it is refreshing to know that all ASEAN countries, as reflected in the document, already understand the need for moderation and inclusiveness, because it is part of the ASEAN pillar, right? Now the question will be how we are going to do and how we are going to move forward with this document that have been acknowledged as documents that is acknowledged by all member countries in ASEAN. Number two, ASEAN dialogue partners and ASEAN plus 3, China, Japan, South Korea, and others, are mostly democratic countries with records of moderation. So I think exchange like this, people-to-people exchange between countries of Southeast Asia and East Asia exchanges between academia, exchanges between NGOs, people organizations would be key for us to really learn from each other. And or at the same time, we understand the need for development so that we can strike a balance that Ambassador Puja mentioned in his introductory remark, that in the end, it's about how we strike the balance between democracy, development, and also progress within the society. Pak Rifat, I should stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Philip Sermonte. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we're a little behind in time, so we'll continue on to the second session of the webinar, which will focus on how to promote religious moderation and tolerance in the ASEAN Plus 3 countries. So the first speaker is Dr. Muhammad Hassan Ansori. Dr. Ansori is the Executive Director of the Habibie Center. He is also a Senior Advisor of Indonesia Geothermal Center of Excellence.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm also tasked by the committee, so I will be talking some point there. Today, I'm going to give my talk on the religious moderation, tolerance, and the challenge of terrorism and violent extremism in Indonesia and the region. One of the nice word that is have been very familiar with the Muslim Indonesia is the word wasatiyah. Wasatiyah actually is drawn from the Arabic word al-wusta or al-wasit, means middle. That is why the referee of the football we call wasit. Wasit means referee, or that wasit should act moderately. Yeah. Next slide, please. So I would like to give background before I talk on the specific issue on the religious moderation. So if we talk actually global war, we mostly categorize into 4 critical period of the global war. This is once that was what created by ROK. So World War with that period, World War I, World War II, Second War, and the last war we call War Against Terrorism that mostly started from 1970s. This is important to emphasize because most of the data, when we talk on the violent extremism and our terrorism, we start from the 1970s. Next slide, please. This is the data that actually I drawn from the global terrorism database that is developed by the University of Maryland, and this is one of the most widely used by some scholars when they talk on the issue of terrorism. This data actually important. Sometimes we need to understand ourselves. Sometimes we need to compare with other people or other regions. In order to understand our region, our beloved region, sometimes we can see our region when we compare with our region all over the world related to the issue of terrorism or violent extremism. Based on this data, we can see and we can draw some 2 important points actually. Within these 5 decades, from 1970, we can see that the last decade between 2010 and 2020 is the most critical decade of the terrorist attack. And the second one, we can see that there are some regions that have.
Okay, I think the host account is back. Can we request for the host account to share, to continue
sharing? Share?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So next slide, please. So I would like to invite you all to focus more specifically our beloved region, which is ASEAN. So from this data, we can see there are at least three ASEAN states that have the highest number of terrorist attacks within at least 5 decades. Yeah, the number 1 is Thailand, and then the Philippines, and then Indonesia. Yeah, Indonesia. But one thing I would like, some people are wondering why Thailand and Philippines have the mostly the dominant number of terrorist attacks in Southeast Asia. And when I come to the to the dedication of this database, and I was surprised because this database also, decoding separatist movement, which is located in Mindanao, southern part of Philippines, and also southern part of the Thai as the terrorists as well. This is why the cases of the terrorist attack in these two countries are high. Next slide, please. This is actually because we see that there is a little bit a problem when we look at the database that is developed by the University of Maryland. We see, and it is a little bit problematic because they coded separatist movement as a terrorist, but also in the case of Indonesia, they coding, for instance, Pemuda Pancasila, Pancasila Youth, and FBI, Islamic Defender Front, also as terrorists. And we see this is a problematic, and this is why. And then we are at the Habibie Center, we try to develop our own database that we call Deteksi Indonesia, the database on terrorism and counterterrorism in Indonesia. That we don't coding this conservative group as terrorists, because they just conservative but not violent extremists or terrorists. And we see from this data, within around 15 years, that at least from 2011 we reached the cases of terrorist attack in Indonesia reached a peak, particularly in 2012 and 13. This is what we call it. This is probably the bloodiest terrorist attack in Indonesia. Next slide, please. And if we see the trend of terrorist attack by using the variable of Indonesian provinces, we can see from this data that Greater Jakarta and then Central Sulawesi, also Central Java, have probably the highest number of terrorist attack. But if we compare at least combine two variables, the incident and the impact of the terrorist attack, mostly the death people, we can see that terrorist attack in Greater Jakarta is the bloodiest one, compared to what happened in at least in Central Sulawesi, in Central Java, or any other areas in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So after we received some evidence or scientific evidence on the terrorist attack in Southeast Asia, I just try to do a very quick desk review on the some explaining factor of the violent extremism in Southeast Asia. There are some factors why Southeast Asia has been the home and fertile ground of terrorist network for decades. There are some factors: weak state, history of political violence, high level of poverty, porous borders, political corruption, loosening political control, ignorance toward the insurgent of militant group, and last but not least, and that we are right now talking about, is the weak literacy policy and the practices of religious moderation in Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. Okay, I would like to take, when talk to Southeast Asia, take the Indonesian as the cases. And this is what I would like to present some evidence on the trend of religious extremism and intolerance in Indonesia that have been done, research and studies that have been done by various institutes, our think tank in Indonesia. The one that was conducted by the Starang Institute, for instance, it indicates that there is a decline in tolerance from 75 in 2015 to 70. There is a 5% decline in 2018. The one also, for instance, a survey that was conducted by Wahid Institute report that stated there is an increase in incident of religious intolerance in recent years. The report was published in 2019. There's also a survey by PPIM the same year that said the internal intolerance is often stronger than external intolerance. So this is important to differentiate between internal and external intolerance. But one more important that when we look at the religious moderation, we also try to see the interaction this religious intolerance with other social variable. We can see how actually this tolerance also provide impact to the election, on the psychological individual health, on the violence, and particularly on the public or social services among society. Next slide, please. So when we talk our effort in fighting terrorism, mostly we categorize into three general framework: the prevention, countering, and rehabilitation. So this is the effort that we cannot separate from each other. This is one integral thing. Next slide, please. But when we see the Indonesian government effort in fighting terrorism by looking at the three categories of effort in fighting terrorism, this is actually based on our data from the database, the Deteksi Indonesia that I mentioned earlier. This is very unfortunate because there is, the effort of rehabilitation is very much, less conducted. Compared to the counter-terrorism and prevention, this is much more dominant. So the proportion of the effort of rehabilitation is, is very tiny. What I say, because this is only comprised of 3% of the national effort of fighting terrorism in Indonesia. Not only a small proportion, which is very unbalanced effort. Most the rehabilitation effort in Indonesia tends to be ad hoc, project oriented. We don't see any the evaluation and monitoring, law enforcement of local government, and the focus mainly given to religious and educational background. Next slide, please. This is the impact of terrorist attack in Indonesia, at least within 16 or 17 months, between 2017 and 18, and the data. This data is derived also from Deteksi Indonesia, Habib Center Deteksi Indonesia. Within 15 months, we can see there is at least 50 people died because of the terrorist attack. In addition to the building damage, to the kidnapping and wounded people. They are these innocent people, these lay people. They don't have, these people are the people that doesn't have any relation yet with the issue of terrorism, but they just become the the victim. Next slide, please. But what we see when we talk about, and this is the biggest challenge, for the effort of fighting violent extremism in Indonesia, the biggest challenge is related to the rehabilitation of the victim, victim of terrorists, either like our data here, like I mentioned, but very unfortunate, almost victim, our right of victim are mostly overlooked and not part of the priorities in counter-terrorism effort in Indonesia. This is very unfortunate, and I'm not happy about it. Since the legislation of our terrorist act, our regulation, the government has only begun to distribute compensation to limited number of victims, and almost none of the more than 500 recorded terrorism victims in Indonesia in 2016 has received any compensation from the government. This is data that I got from the Yayasan Penyintas Indonesia. But when we would like to know more about detail of data, there are at least three foundations in Indonesia that have been focused on this issue. Aliansi Damai Indonesia, Prasasti Perdamaian Foundation, and the Foundation for Victims. Next slide, please. So it is important when we talk about religious moderation, to see the interaction between religious moderation and violent extremism. Religious moderation means, of course, that have been emphasized by our previous analysts and also ambassadors, that we don't act between two extreme. Yeah, religiously we don't want to act too liberal or violent liberal, but also ultra conservative or extremist. So religious moderation will bring about tolerance, and tolerance will be about harmony in society. But in reverse, in opposite, religious extremism will bring about hatred, and hatred will bring about the violent extremism. It is important to emphasize here, particularly the policy and the strategy of government of Indonesia. The government of Indonesia mostly use religion as part of building nationalism. So in Indonesia, being religious is being Indonesian, and being Indonesian is also being religious. So we cannot spread from each other. Next slide, please. There are, a couple of ecosystems. If you talk religious moderation, that we cannot separate each other. When we do religious moderation, we do comprehensively and integrate and engage all this ecosystem: society, education, religiosity, media, politics, and state. We cannot only focus on one or two ecosystem and ignore other system. So, for instance, within my slide, we just as I touched, because I just give a focus on a specific domain of education as the ecosystem of religious moderation. Next slide, please. Education, curriculum, and tolerance. So education has become one of the important ecosystem of religious moderation, because education will serve as socialization and internalization of modern religious values and norms, either informal or non-formal education and public education. There are some principles if we would like to build, a curriculum of tolerance, a curriculum of religious moderation. There are specific values and ideals that should be translated. The first one is humanism, and the second one is multiculturalism. The third one, democracy and tolerance. But one thing that I would like to to let what our guests know, that I just confirmed to our Ministry of Religious Affairs on the development of the curriculum of tolerance. But very unfortunate, this curriculum of tolerance are still under development and not finished yet. So we have in Indonesia actually. We don't still have any specific curriculum on tolerance, but still under development of the Ministry of Religious Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. So the moderate curriculum of religion should be the expression of essential religious tenets, which protect human dignity and build public well-being, and based on fair and equal principle, and follows the natural constitution. Next slide, please. Yeah, although the government of Indonesia, like the Ministry of Religious Affairs as leading actor of the building religious moderation, they have built actually the roadmap of religious moderation in Indonesia. Although they haven't developed yet any curriculum of development. So they have a good target until at least until 2024. At least we have acquired more or less established religious moderation, which is very dominant among any segment of society in Indonesia. Next slide, please. This is the last one. So I would like to also, give some update on the recent portrait of religious moderation in Indonesia. This is mostly based on the survey that was conducted by our Ministry of Religious Affairs. We see that the index of religious moderation literacy at the national level also shows the high category with an average of score 97. Most important, there are 4 main principles of religious moderation that is highlighted and mandated by President Joko Widodo. If we talk religious moderation in Indonesia, these 4 principles should be included. First is the commitment, which is based on Pancasila and our national constitution of 1945, upholding tolerance, anti-violence, and respect for the local culture and values of Indonesian society. And the Ministry of Religious Affairs also established in 2020 a working group on strengthening religious moderation program. and that is bulleted in the Decree of Minister of Religious Affairs 2020. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you, Rifat. Time is up.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ansari. Last and certainly but not least, we have the honor to invite Dr. Wu Bingbing. Dr. Wu is a State of Qatar Chair Professor in Middle Eastern Studies at Peking University. He is also a Senior Research Fellow of Institute for International and Strategic Studies of Peking University, Director of Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Peking University, as well as Director for Department of Arabic Language and Culture at Peking University. Dr. Wu received his PhD in Middle Eastern Studies at Peking University in 2003. His research interests focus on politics of contemporary Middle East, China-Middle East relations, Shia Islam and Iranian studies, and Islamist movements. He is the author of The Rise of Moderation of the Modern Shia Islamism and editor of the Belt and Road Initiative, Cases of Practice and Risk Control in Cultural Affairs. He's also published a number of academic articles. Dr. Wu is currently a board member of Chinese Society of Middle Eastern Studies and board member of China-Arab Friendship Association and China-Iran Friendship Association. So Dr. Wu will be highlighting how to promote moderation and its value among the youth. Without further ado, the screen is yours, Dr. Wu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rifat. Excellencies, distinguished guests and dear friends, Assalamu alaikum. I'm greatly honored to be invited to this seminar, and my topic is how to promote moderation and the value among youth. Actually, I learned a lot from all the presentations before, and I think there's a lot to be discussed. So to discuss about how to promote moderation and its value among the youth, we need to address the specific features and demands of the youth. According to the definition of WHO and UN, youth means an age group between 15 and 24-year-old. The youth are in the process of formation of a system of mature values and easy to be influenced by different factors. They experience a socialization process through learning and adaptation to become full members of the society. They need to learn life skills, to develop knowledge and production capability, and to accept a set of social norms. This socialization process is comprehensive, relevant to school education and family life, as well as state and community. So, to promote moderation and its value requires also a comprehensive approach, including efforts from state, community, family, school, and individual, and covering political, economic, and cultural dimensions. First, sustainable development. Youth have hope and dreams to the future, such as good education, jobs, apartments, marriage, and family. Sustainable economic and social development is crucial to realize those dreams, and employment is the fundamental factor. The Arab Spring and the 2019 protest movements in some Middle Eastern countries reflect the pursuit of the youth for a better life. The economic growth should be translated into social economic development through creating jobs for the youth. With a high percentage of youth population, high unemployment rate of the youth means a deficit of development, making the youth feel angry and depressed, which creates an unhelpful social environment for promoting moderation value among the youth. To achieve joint development, China launched Belt and Road Initiative in 2013 in Kazakhstan and Indonesia. And in September 2021, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Development Initiative, calling for staying committed to development as a priority. Second, stability. The chaotic situation in countries like Iraq, Syria, and Libya creates space for extremist movements. In Syria, the number of refugees reached 7 million, and there are another 7 million internally displaced people. 1 decade of crisis means a whole generation is born and grows up inside the refugee camps. You know how difficult it is to promote moderation and its value in such a situation. So to reach political settlement in Syria and Libya is urgent to restore social stability. Stability needs both strong state and the mass participation of people, especially the youth. Weak state cannot safeguard the sovereignty and security. At the same time, youth participation is highly relevant to stability. Otherwise, they will be isolated from the society and the political process and could be influenced by radical thoughts easier. Third, mutual understanding and inclusiveness. One could not choose your neighbor. A good neighborliness based on mutual understanding and regional integration will contribute to conflict management and peace, which could help to promote moderation. In regard to Palestinian issue, a peace process starting in early 1990s has been suspended without making any progress in implementation of two-state solution. Many Palestinian youth are living in anger. The international community should exert more efforts on the Middle East peace process. In April 2022, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed a global security initiative, calling for a vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security to maintain world peace and security, respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries and non-interference in internal affairs, and peacefully resolving differences and disputes between countries. In the Middle East, the mentality of sectarianism is opposite to the value of mutual understanding and inclusiveness. The natural differences between different sects have combined with geopolitical competition in the region and evolved into sectarian confrontation, leading to more hatred and conflicts. To promote moderation needs to reduce the tensions of regional geopolitical competition in the Middle East. In 2020, China has proposed to establish a regional dialogue platform for the Gulf region. All the countries, including GCC countries and Iran, could exert joint efforts to manage the conflicts on the platform through dialogue and reach a regional consensus. Fourth, cultural openness and dialogue among civilizations. To promote cultural openness is a component of efforts to promote moderation among the youth. Diversity of the civilizations and cultures is a basic feature of the world. Cultural openness means respecting diversity through transcultural dialogue. China-Arab States Cooperation Forum is established in 2004. In the framework of this forum, a seminar of China-Arab dialogue on civilizations is held every 2 years since 2005. This mechanism is a main platform for dialogue between Chinese and Arab civilizations. On March 22, 2022, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Mr. Wang Yi attended and addressed the opening ceremony of the 48th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is the first time. He said, both Chinese and Islamic civilizations are ancient civilizations with important influence in the world. The exchanges between the two sides, which have lasted for thousands of years, have a profound historical heritage and a solid foundation of popular support. Friendship is a mainstream of bilateral relations. Equality is the basis of mutual communication, and the win-win result is the goal of mutual cooperation. We always stay committed to respecting and trusting each other, mutual learning, and safeguard the diversity of civilizations in the world. China and the Islamic world have found a path of friendly coexistence and win-win cooperation among different civilizations, becoming a model of acting on a new type of international relations. Fifth, guidance through education. Values are developed through education in school, family, and community. School is one of the most important institutions for youth to receive education, gaining knowledge, experience, skills, and norms. To offer education to the youth to offer guidance to the youth through education is the duty of schools and universities. So as a professor at the university, here I would like to share some personal experiences about our efforts to promote this value of transcultural exchanges. So the Department of Arabic Language and Culture at Peking University has organized a China Middle East Youth Forum. So we invited from the young students from more than 20 universities from UAE, Turkey, Iran, Qatar, US, to come to Beijing to discuss about the issues with common interests and common concerns. We also organized trips in summer vacation and winter vacation of the students of the university from different faculties to make visits to the region in the Middle East, such as Qatar, UAE, Oman, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, even Turkey and Russia. And also we help the students to visit the refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon. So all this experience helped them to understand the other culture, the other people, the other nations. And also we are expecting more cooperation and interaction with Indonesia and Korea and all the other Asian countries. And I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wu Bingbing. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the interactive discussion session of our webinar. Since we are a bit short on time, apologies that we will only have about 10 minutes for Q&A, for question and answer. We encourage everyone to use the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom app to pose your questions or perhaps provide your views or comments to our speakers. Please provide your name, your organization or institution, as well as your question or comment. We would also like to remind participants to be respectful when providing your comments or questions to the speakers. So at this point, we open the floor for any questions. At the moment, I see none, so I think as moderator, if I may, I would just like to pose one question to Dr. Park. Dr. Park, it's one interesting point that you gave earlier during your presentation is that a survey in 2020 shows that 82% of South Korean population have a negative attitude towards Islam, which was far higher than any other religions. Would it be okay to elaborate a bit on that? What were the what is the common misconception, especially from South Koreans towards Islam or Muslims? This is something that I think would be very interesting to hear. Please, Dr. Park.
Thank you so much for your very interesting questions, Mr. Rifat. And the biggest problem among the South Koreans in terms of understanding Islam is that they don't know about Islam very much. They just regarded Islam as a very radical and exclusive religion, which is very different from other religions, especially the Christianities and Buddhism and other mainstream religions in South Korea. And they do not know about the similarities between the Quran and the holy books, and they let me introduce some examples about my parents and my relatives. And when I talk to them about that, my research interest is about the political Islam in Southeast Asia, and they said that, oh my God, you're studying about terrorist groups. So they just received information from highly distorted information about that since the 9/11.
they just regarded that Islam is a center of the terrorist groups and terrorist ideologies, and they don't know about that whether there is a difference between the very distorted version of the Islamic extremism and the general belief in Islam. And even younger generations who, even though they have a chance to visit Muslim predominant countries like Malaysia and Indonesia and Turkey, but that they just regard that Islam cannot be compatible with cannot be compatible with the South Korean society, because they just heard that Muslims cannot eat pork and they don't drink alcohol drinks and soda, because in South Korea we have embraced the dietary culture of drinking soju and drinking alcohols and then having pork meat for 1,000 years. So they just believe that Islam cannot be compatible. And there's also lots of stereotypes about Islam, but it will be not enough to discuss and introduce about those stereotypes in this given context. But so, and other misconception about yes, that is what I'm saying is that basically South Koreans do not have much information about Islam. So my point is that they should have more opportunities to learn about what the Islam is, what the Islamic principles are, and what the Muslims are. And then in my lecture about the Southeast Asian politics and Indonesian politics, I introduced a lot of things about the inclusiveness and the tolerance within the Muslim countries, and especially in Indonesia. That whenever I introduce some kind of concept of liberal Islam in Indonesia, and they surprise a lot. My students are surprised a lot, and they just regard the Islam is like a synonym, they just regarded the Islam as a. I'm really sorry about that. I'm very discomforting to what I'm saying is that they don't have much knowledge about Islam. They just regard Islam as a terrorist groups or the exclusivist group, militant groups. So yeah, so there's a lot of misconceptions in South Korea, but things is getting better since a lot of scholars, a lot of the intellectuals who are specialized in Islam and the Southeast Asia try to reduce those kind of misconceptions. So yeah, that's my point.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Park, for that elaboration. We have two raised hands and one question from the chat box. Pak Idi, if I may, since we have the question on the chat box first, I will read this out loud first, and then perhaps give the floor to the ASEAN IPR Executive Director. So in the chat box, I think this is directed towards all of our speakers. From Sun Young Yang from the ROK mission to ASEAN. So how would ASEAN plus 3 countries promote interfaith dialogue or exchanges projects within the ASEAN plus 3 mechanisms? Any policy recommendations? So I think it's safe to say this would be directed towards all of our speakers. Anyone who would like to take on this question? And then afterwards, we have 2 raised hands as well. Pa Phillips, if I may, perhaps ask you to start. Apologies for giving you the spotlight, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. I think this is a very interesting question because in the end, it's about what should be done. And then I think the question is right, that we need to put it under APT mechanism. But if I may suggest, we should not reinvent the wheel, because under APT mechanism, there are a lot of initiatives that have been done. So what we need to do is to deepen and include teams. For example, in the APT mechanism, there is this ministerial meetings for ministers responsible for certain things. For example, There are ministerial meetings for a minister responsible for education between ASEAN and APT. And there's also ministerial meetings between ministers of APT on the youth, for example. And there has been already university linkage under APT mechanism. So I think it's been done, and what we need to do is to deepen more and include this within the APT mechanism. The problem with ASEAN sometimes is that we keep adding new things, and then it's becoming so big because we keep reinventing new wheels for every new issues that is coming up. But I think already platforms have been there under this APT mechanism. What we need to do is to include on this topic onto this APT ministerial meetings.
Okay, thank you. I agree that for I think for ASEAN, it's always we always try to ensure that there is no duplication of initiatives done, even though there's always something new wherever there's a new issue that draws up. Can I invite perhaps Dr. Wu, if you yes, please, Dr. Wu.
Yes, think, forgive my ignorance. I don't know if there any mechanism for the youth for ASEAN plus 3 countries to meet each other regularly, for example, from university students or, the youth leaders to have a forum based on, the regional issues, because they themselves, they're multicultural background, so they come from, from East Asian countries and also Islamic countries, there are different religion background. So I think itself, could help for people, especially the youth, I think, if such a mechanism could be created under the APT mechanism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wu. Can I invite perhaps if Dr. Ansori or Dr. Park would like to add anything from what has been addressed?
Thank you, Rifat. First of all, I would like to, agree with Pak Philips here. That I think ministerial meeting is also important, but other thing I would like to add is also the information exchange on the violent extremism, terrorism among member states, and also legal. Of course, legal framework and joint declaration. But one thing that I would like to, to raise here, the biggest challenge for us in the ASEAN when we face the issue of violent extremism is there are some differences among ASEAN member states when we talk on the violent extremism, on the religious moderation and terrorism. First, there is a different perception and assessment of the terrorist threat, different political will, different perception on the concrete of approaches to fight violent extremism, different capabilities on the national military and budget and law enforcement agency, and also the principle of problem of principle also non-interference and national sovereignty. I think this is among the biggest challenge when we like to deal the religious moderation to to uphold in the Southeast Asia. Thanks, Rifat.
I have a simple comments on the Mrs. Young's questions that I agree with Professor Wu's comment that we need to meet regularly. There should be some regular meetings for discussing each other, and based on the APT's mechanisms like Musyawarah and Mufakat or the consensus and agreement, we should start at a very easy level, like a cultural exchange program and a student exchange program, by it through especially make the students and make the people experience other religions, other cultures. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ansari and Dr. Park for your comments. I think if I may also add on, one of the first initiatives between the ASEAN IPR and the Republic of Korea, as highlighted by the executive director earlier this morning, was a youth conference on peace and tolerance. I think that is definitely one of the platforms that basically it touches upon Dr. Wu, Dr. Park, your comments, and also ASEAN has an initiative called ASEAN Interfaith Camp, for example. I think this also is an initiative that is now regularly conducted and has the element of spreading the messages and values of tolerance, moderation. So I would like to give the floor now to my boss, Pa Puja, Executive Director. The screen is yours, sir.
Thank you. For the interest of time, I'll be very, very brief, and probably my queries addressed to Philip Fermonte or whoever wishes to jump in. I'm referring to the recent book of Francis Fukuyama, Identity, because this is reflecting the contemporary identity politics and also the struggle for recognitions. I don't know whether this new trend in the global society now is completely contradict to the efforts to promote dialogue among civilization or interfaith dialogue, as well as to promote moderation. Thank you.
Pa Phillips, the screen is yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Puja, for the question. And yes, identity politics have been on the rise. I think in many corners of the world. But at the same time, I think there has been some acknowledgement as well on the factors behind the rise of this trends of identity politics. That probably we quote unquote fail to address the impact of globalization. There are the so-called the losers of globalizations, right? Those who are losing jobs, those who are failed to compete, and then at this point, the intervention from the state, I think, is very important to mitigate the impact of or to protect, the so-called losers of globalization, right? And then these are issues that actually Fukuyama also mentioned that in his other book, that if a state is not institutionalized, and then they will fail to deliver, and then to deliver, if it is failed to deliver, then grievances appear. And in many studies, as we know, grievances are one of the factors that would provoke conflicts, and so on and so forth. So it is true that identity politics is on the rise, but at the same time, I think we have to really put our heads together and continuously discuss what are the causes of this. And I suspect the main cause is that on this front of governance, on public service deliveries, on the part of the states. That is why I think we need to strengthen the state in the sense that we need to promote democratic states with good policies and good governance. Thank you, Pak Puja.
Thank you, Pa Phillips. I just wanted to check whether any other speakers would like to add on to Executive Director Puja's comments or inquiry. Okay, if not, in the interest of time, We have two more raised hands from Mr. Mark Ritchie from the Philippines. And I also want to recognize Excellency Ambassador Kwan. He would like to take the floor. If I may, Ambassador, I will give the floor to Mr. Mark Ritchie first, and then afterwards to you, Ambassador. So from the Philippines, Mr. Mark Ritchie, please, you have the screen.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. So I just want to ask a main question here. Why do we need to bound something boundless? Because, the nature of religion or even philosophies in which they are rooted from is for peace and moderation. It is deeply entrenched, right? Islam is peace, Christianity teaches love, Buddhism has middle path, Confucianism has Ren. They are boundless. Then comes sovereignty, which reinforces not just borders, but regulations. Do you think that political moderation is something that we must look at also, instead of thinking that religion is a domain to be moderated by those who use religion for political ends?
All right. Thank you, sir. So I think the main do you think
why do we
for
need
all speakers
to bound something boundless? Yeah.
And do we need political moderation as well in addition to religious moderation? Perhaps I will open the floor to all of the speakers if whoever wants to jump in and address this. I don't know. Sorry, Dr. Ansari, would you mind perhaps addressing this first, and then we can move to the other speakers who would like to jump in?
So I think please other speaker first.
Okay.
Very quickly, Pak Rifat.
Yes, Pak Phillips.
Yeah, I think we have to find answers in institutions, right? Of course, there are those who would interpret things more radically than others, but I think institutions matters, stateness matters, or political moderation can be achieved through several things. For example, the adoption of certain types of electoral system, or what we call electoral engineering, right? Whether it will produce more representativeness of the various groups within the society. So political institutions and electoral institutions are important in that sense. Also, if states have institutions that can, again, deliver public goods and then address grievances, poverty alleviation. So it's about governance. And governance can only be achieved if the state is institutionalized, right? So that's why it's a long struggle, as Ambassador Puja mentioned in his intervention. It's a long struggle, a long process that we all continue to fight for.
Thank you, Pak Phillips. Perhaps Dr. Wu or Dr. Park, would you want to add on to what's been addressed by Dr. Fermonte?
Okay.
Yes, please, Dr. Wu.
Yes, I think I have mentioned this point that for example, the sectarianism, definitely it's opposite to the religious moderation and its value, but at the same time, it's combined with the geopolitical competition in the region. So, different factors are combined with each other. You have to work on every one of them. So that's why, we should also work on how to, reduce the tensions and reduce, the serious geopolitical regional competition in the Middle East. Because, I think Dr. Mohammed Hassan Ansari has mentioned, the Middle East has witnessed the most serious terrorist attacks in the world. So I think, I agree, but, we have to work on every dimension. So that's why, I think his approach of comprehensive, efforts should be adopted. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Wu. If I may move on, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give the screen now to Excellency Ambassador Kwan, please.
Mr. Rifat. And I don't have the luxury to raise a number of questions on my mind. given the time limitation. But I have listened to a number of good presentations and also suggestions of potential solution, approach to religious moderation. In general, as I see the situation in our region, including Korea, China, Japan, and the broader ASEAN region, I don't think we are suffering from religious originated violent extremism today. We have had a typical time or period going back to in the middle of 2010s when ISIS has risen in its prominence, particularly in Iraq and the broader Middle Eastern region. And to respond to this extremism, there has been international consensus, particularly in the UN Security Council, by adopting a number of resolutions legally binding. Its titles have contained the reference to violent extremism, which was new coinage by that time. So violent extremism, during that time, the result of the study, this violent extremism is not related in any way, in whatsoever, with a particular religion, Buddhism, Confucianism, Christianity, Islam. So violent extremism has its own cause, maybe diverse cause, as was suggested by many experts, but it's not associated with a particular religion. We are talking about religious moderation today. I think it affects all the religions, not particular single religion. That is, I think, very important. Otherwise, we have to focus on one particular religion to explain all kind of problems or violent extremism. Compared to these periods, I think today we've been quite successful in introducing and diffusing moderation, religious, even political. We have to keep going with our achievements and our success. Many experts referred to our multifaceted, multidimensional efforts across the board. We need, for the sake of moderation, we need political leadership who is sensitive to this cause and idea in their own societies. And we need economic development and economic stability. This poverty alleviation, poverty eradication is the very basic to enable people, society, moderate. And also we need the social safety network. It's related to economic growth and development. And also we need the education. What is violent extremism? What is the solution and approach for religious moderation? We've been doing this over the years, but we have to strengthen and deepen this education. And also in the cultural dimension, cultural understanding, mutual understanding, and also cultural sensitivity to the different societies. The ASEAN is known to be very diverse region in terms of a political system, in many ways, different religion, different culture. But as Indonesia promotes, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, we all promote to respect unity in diversity, or diversity in unity. So our region, including Korea, China, Japan, all promote this idea. It's a universal idea. And one last comment is that we mentioned the certain problems relating to religious moderation in our region, in particular the ASEAN region, in the two places like Patani region and Mindanao. But as far as I understand, the Patani issue, the Deep South issue, has nothing to do with the religion. It's more or less the social complaints or social needs. I think it's being very skillfully handled by the affected communities there. So I don't think we don't have to refer to the Patani issue in the context of terrorism or religious confrontation, something like that. With that, I would like to express my profound appreciation to His Excellency Igusti Puza, the Executive Director of AIPR, and all the prominent experts, scholars in this field for sharing your insights and in-depth knowledge and experience on this particular subject with all the participants. As I understand, many of my colleagues and diplomats in the ASEAN community, diplomatic community, are watching over our discussions as well. Thank you very much for all the audiences.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your comments. If I may, in the interest of time, we have one last question that I would like to read out loud from the comment box. It's actually coming from one of our interns, Ms. Hitomi. She has a question actually specifically for Dr. Ansori, but I will give the floor to other speakers as well if you would like to add on. Would you mind sharing your thoughts regarding the Indonesian National Action Plan 2020-2024 on counterterrorism? Perhaps by focusing whether the NAP has incorporated gender and youth perspectives within the draft, within the NAP itself. Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy. So, Dr. Ansori, if I may.
Thank you, Ms. Hitomi. Actually, the action plan has been completed, yeah, and it was actually the main institution that have been doing that, of course, in collaboration with the government, is the Wahid Institute actually. But I know because I was several times invited to be the resource person to give review, yeah, to the action plan. But the action plan itself actually has been, submitted to the government. But honestly speaking, until right now, we haven't seen any implementation yet on the action plan. But if you would like to know the detail of the document, I can access actually to the executive director, our colleague here, my close friends, Taba, the executive director of the Wahid Institute. That I think I can ask the document of the action plan if you would like to know more of the detail on the action plan. But at least what so far I know, the issue of gender very widely and intensively included in the action plan. But not sure about youth. I just don't know. So that's so far what I know about the action plan, the current condition and institution of the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ansori. Perhaps can I invite Pa Philips, a fellow Indonesian, since this is a question on Indonesian National Action Plan on counterterrorism, whether you have any comments, or perhaps Dr. Wu as well, who's been focusing a lot of his studies on that as well.
Well, I have to admit, I'm not expert on this, but as far as the we did a lot of research on the women and terrorism at CSIS. You may want to download the report of the research that includes the various assessment on documents and the issue of women protection of women and also children in the context of counterterrorism in Indonesia. And in the frame of, for example, de-radicalization, I think it is important to address that issue as well, because recent incidents that we observe and we saw, at least in the context of Indonesia, more and more women and children were being included in some of these terrorist acts, and it is worrying development. And then I think the action plan already concerned about that, but the details of which I think I could not refer to very much here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pa Phillips. Can I check whether Dr. Park or Dr. Wu would like to add anything before I close the session?
I barely know about the action plan, but I heard news from the media, Indonesian media, that it depends on whether the action plan will be supported by the money, I mean the budget. So that I haven't updated any news that the action plan does not secure the tangible amount of budget to implement these kind of diverse or range of the programs to reduce the terrorism, to reduce terrorism, and then promote pluralism and inclusiveness. So I think it depends on the willingness of the government, the current government of Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Park. If there's nothing more to add from anyone, please allow me to continue and close this session. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, drawing closer towards the end of the webinar, please allow me to do a little bit of paraphrasing on the ideas that's been tabled and shared this morning. So we've heard from our speakers on, I think it's safe to have a general understanding that to promote values of moderation and tolerance, a comprehensive approach is necessary, which would include efforts from the state, from community level, school, education, family, all the way to the individual level. And of course, covering the political, economic, and cultural dimension. We've heard about how party politics and electoral competition could give way to moderation and tolerance, even amongst the hardliners. From a regional perspective, there's been highlights of efforts in promoting the culture and values of moderation and tolerance, namely through ASEAN. Notwithstanding, discussions also highlighted challenges in a region that is so diverse, with various human development index and economic growth. Despite this, one interesting highlight is an opportunity to deepen cooperation with ASEAN's partners, whether that is dialogue partners, sectoral dialogue partners, development partners, and others. There's also emphasis that education system has been one of the primary strategies of religious moderation. However, what is equally important is to develop a curriculum of religious moderation. In Indonesia's case, for example, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, as lead actor of religious moderation, has created a roadmap to mainstream and strengthen religious moderation at the national level. The Ministry of Religious Affairs of Indonesia also had set up a strategy of religious moderation through broadcasting, educational system, management of house of worships, management of public sphere and Islamic boarding school or pesantren, and other typical religious institutions. Lastly, we've heard about salient points on promoting values and culture of moderation and tolerance amongst the youth. The keywords on this part include sustainable development, political and social stability, mutual understanding and inclusiveness, dialogue and cultural openness, and of course, guidance through education. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our webinar. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to acknowledge all of our speakers for sharing their experiences and expertise, whether on the current situation of radicalism and extremism, as well as on how to promote religious moderation and tolerance. I would also like to thank the mission of the Republic of Korea to ASEAN for giving the ASEAN IPR an opportunity to support this webinar. And most importantly, we thank you, all of the participants, for your active participation, comments, criticism, and inputs provided into this morning's discussion. We wish you all stay safe, stay healthy, and we wish everyone a great weekend ahead. Thank you so much.